So, Michael, it's really good to be with you this morning. And I am so impressed with the approach that you take to estate planning. I think that you get it in such a deep way. And I'm hoping that you can share with us what brought you to this work and helps you to understand it from such a personal avenue.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jamie. I really appreciate the question. I come at estate planning from a pretty, personal place. I basically grew up in a family of 7 children. I'm the oldest, and fortunately, my parents planned, their estate. They had a trust between them that they formed about 10 years ago or so now. And then pretty suddenly, about 4 years ago, my dad passed away. It was totally unexpected and really hard for the family. And through that process, I realized that really the importance of having a plan in place, because the fact that my parents had planned allowed us to breathe as a family and kind of focus on that aspect of it rather than worrying about everything else going on. And I know as a family, we were extremely grateful that my parents had made that decision early on. Really that kind of shaped the direction of my legal career from that point forward, realizing that I wanted to help families that were similarly situated to mine, and wanting to really be a guide for people who were going through something similar, because I think, as I like to tell people, you don't know what's going to happen in life, and it's super uncertain. And really, the best that we can do is plan, and that's just incredibly important. And I want to be there for families like my own.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. I'm thinking of like what would have happened to a family like yours. You know, you get 7 kids, you have a wife, trying to figure all of this out and have everybody's needs and their personalities and their feelings when they're really at the worst point in their life. And as you've shared with me, your dad was really young,
Yeah.
at all expected. Not that death is ever really expected, it's always shocking, but your dad's death was really outside the norm. How old did you say he was when he died?
Yeah, so at the time he was only 57, and I was 33.
Yeah.
So it was really tough, and totally unexpected, because he died from an accident that happened at home, and none of us could have ever guessed. We're
Yeah.
still we're still in shock, even though it's 4.5 years later. And so I just think the planning piece is just so important. And
Do you think that it helped you kind of in your bereavement, that because he did his own plans, that you knew you had done what was right for him, and then maybe it helped you to grieve better?
yeah, I think that's such a great question. I think that's absolutely true. I think that when someone spells out, what they want in advance, um, it allows you to kind of focus on next steps and to not question what they would have wanted. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's so true, and I think that that's why it's so important, and that's why I tell people that basically it's kind of the greatest gift in some ways that you can give to your children, because you don't know, and you don't want them to have the burden of having to carry that and make decisions in a vacuum, not knowing what you would want. So I think that's absolutely true. And I think my dad, having spelled out what he wanted in advance, was really critical.
Yeah. The other thing that I'm really thinking about is you saying that you're still in shock now, even 4 years later. I mean, one of the things that I think that shares is how grief is so different than what we expect it to be. We sort of just expect it to be a very linear process because that's sort of what we learn in ninth grade psychology, from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, that it's supposed to be, these stages, and we think it's set out like that. And I think what you're sharing, what I'm getting from it is that grief is just a lot different than many of us would understand, not having yet experienced it,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and that having these plans makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And I think there's something that you brought up actually last time we spoke, which really rings true. And I've actually been thinking about it quite a bit since you mentioned it. But I remember you saying that just because you talk about death doesn't make it happen any quicker. And I think as a culture, we need to start changing the dialogue about death because and making it something that we discuss, because it is so important to plan. And if you don't discuss it early on, and you don't know what your loved ones would want, you're really operating from a difficult place when it does happen.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing because I always tell people, that they're gonna die no matter what. The question becomes, are they gonna die with a plan in place or not? Are they gonna give that gift to their loved ones? Like, it's the last time we can actually take care of our loved ones, even when we're not physically present to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Just pave the path. Because just you're sharing it so beautifully that it's just harder than we anticipate. It's just
That's right.
a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's the one thing that we know is going to happen. So much else that you're doing with estate planning, making advance directives and powers of attorney and all those kinds of things, those are in case. But
Right.
the one thing that we know is going to happen, we just don't have a clue as to when.
I think that's really well put. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's really well put. And I mean, that's why I really appreciate speaking with you about this, because I feel like you just really get it. And I think, and not everybody does. And I think you just have such a gift for talking about these issues in a way that really makes sense and is really, really comforting. It's nice to know that we share the same perspective, about the importance to have a dialogue around this. And I just think in your business as well, just the importance of having these conversations. And I think you really speak about it so eloquently in terms of how you talk about grief. So.
Well, I think both of us, I think one of the reasons that we feel connected to each other is because both of us really understand why we do the work that we do.
Right.
And it needs us in a deep way that it's beyond a profession, it's beyond a career. I think for both of us, it really feels like a calling.
Absolutely.
And it makes a difference for people.
Absolutely. I'm just curious if you could kind of speak a little bit more to, I remember we talked a little bit about this, but just what brought you into the work that you do, and kind of, what brought you to, talking with families and about these subjects, which are obviously really difficult. So.
I've been thinking about this more recently, that I have a real need to go against cultural norms. Our culture really says don't talk about stuff like this. And I have always been somebody who wants to talk about the things that we're not supposed to talk about. I was a peer counselor. I was an AIDS educator right at the beginning of the AIDS crisis in the early 80s. I want to be that person that people can depend on to kind of be fearless in this stuff. I think that's quite honestly the truth. And when I was in my mid-20s, one of my very, very good friends was diagnosed with a brain tumor, a glioblastoma, which is the brain tumor that Ted Kennedy and John McCain had. People live with it. And she was such a young woman and had a 10-month-old baby, and I had a 2-year-old baby. And all of our friends, of course, were saying to her, oh, you're young and you're strong and you're going to be fine, because nobody wanted to make her feel worse.
Right.
She didn't really talk to people about the truth of her diagnosis because she didn't want to make them feel worse.
Right.
And I handled it so differently. And I don't know where that really came from, but I was able to just say, will you share with me what this feels like? Can we talk about all of this? And
Mhm.
we did. And I think it was helpful to her, but quite honestly, it was so helpful to me
Yeah.
that I could accept her death with so much more grace, because I knew we had said everything that we needed to say. And I really feel like she drew me to this work, that she guided me here. And um, it's really beautiful for me because she's with me all the time, because
Yeah.
to tell the story about her, and I think about her all the time.
Yeah.
And it's a gift. It's a
Yeah.
gift. And I feel so grateful. The other thing that I've been thinking about with grief is that grief in itself is a gift.
Yeah.
Because grieving is a reflection of the love that we have for that person.
That's so beautifully put. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, gosh, that's really beautifully put. I guess I'm curious too, given that you talk with families so often about these issues, how has that kind of affected you, and also how I mean, I guess tell me a little bit about
So
yeah,
the vast majority of the time of my work, I am with people who are fine and death is theoretical, and
right,
they are putting these plans in place decades before they need them.
yeah,
Sometimes, we're involved with a family who had a sudden death. I'm always reaching out to people after they use our services too. So
mhm,
honestly, sometimes it's a lot more painful than others. When it is a 97-year-old and we're expecting this, it feels like in the normal scheme of things. But I'm thinking of one example of a person who son was murdered and found on Dry Creek. And for some reason, I felt really compelled to be part of that. And I remember I was in her house. I had brought all kinds of things to her. And when I left, I just got into my car and cried and cried and cried.
yeah, yeah,
This is probably 10 years ago. And yet it's that again feels really present for me.
yeah,
And what I really appreciate about that kind of experience is, again, it was a situation in which I could allow her to say whatever she needed, and I could help her find the resources that she needed. And so that feels really fulfilling to me,
yeah, absolutely.
to be that for somebody.
I just wanted to really thank you because I think you do such important work, just in terms of making sure that families have these plans in place, and it's just it's comforting, and it's nice to know that I feel like we share a common calling to
Yeah,
make sure that people are prepared, and for the really for the benefit of their loved ones. So just
absolutely.
want to thank you for that.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for that, because there just are not that many people who really understand why they do what they do.
Right.
Just really appreciate that for you, and I just appreciate your whole approach to the families that you serve. So we're really just really lucky to know each other.
Absolutely. I'm so happy that we met, and I just thank you. Thanks for this conversation. This was wonderful.
Thanks, Michael.